eyes like leeks. It had almost nothing to do with sex. The boy in his corset and farthingale, his head voice and his smooth for the duration chin had not and never had been simply in our pay. Or was it some lost logic the regional accent restores? A young Welsh actor may play a reluctant laborer playing Thisbe botching similes and stop our hearts with wonder. My young friend, he's 7, touched his mother's face last night and said, "It's wet." And making the connection he has had to learn by rote, "You're sad." It's never not like this for him. As if the adolescent's mouth, wherever California spills its luminous vernacular, as if, until the gesture holds, passes, let's just say we'll live here for a while. O habitus, O wall, O moon. For my young friend, it's never not some labored simulacrum. Every tone of voice, each give, each take, is wrested from an unrelenting social dark. There's so much dark to go around, how odd to be this and no other. And like the others marked for death, it's a wonder we pass for locals at all. Take Thisbe, for instance. Minutes ago, she was fretting for lack of a beard, and now she weeps for a lover slain by a minute's misreading. Reader, it's sharp as the lion's tooth. Who takes the weeping away now takes delight as well, which feels for all the world like honest work. They've never worked with mind before, the rich man says, but moonlight says, with flesh. I'm going to read a couple of 3 sections from a longer poem about a series of frescoes in the Brancacci Chapel in Florence. They are based upon the life of St. Peter, and I think I do not need to explain. That's what I'm hoping. Right. The first one is based upon a legend that St. Peter was so powerful in his ability to heal the sick that to even be touched by his shadow was to be healed. From the life of St. Peter, 1, his shadow. They brought us out on the pavement then, our pallets and cots, the poorest barely decent in their bedclothes, and facing, as best we could, the sun, so whether he would or no, his passing shadow might pass over us and we be healed, as if some ghastly catalogue of everything you fear the flesh might one day have in store for you should suddenly block your way back home. But look how the painter has lovingly rendered the clubs of my knees, gall knots, hooves of callous you would surely look away from in the ordinary course of things, calves like an afterthought trailing behind. I wonder, will I get to keep some sign of this when I'm made whole? I've come to think the body scorns hypothesis. Hasn't it paid for its losses in kind, while we are writ in water? My advantage here was learning so early how little the world will spare us. Now this rumored cure. You see the peeling fresco. It was once as chaste as you. There was a rich man who wanted to join those who hoped to be saved by giving all their money to St. Peter to further his works and distribute to the poor. But Ananias was fearful and held back a little, and for this he was struck dead. The death of Ananias. There must have been something withheld, as if you know the story, you'll know has been said about me. I saw what we all saw: goats and cattle, grain, an ancient and 3 newer family houses, and finally the second best vineyard for miles around, converted into silver and simply laid on the ground at their feet. And namely, the one called Peter. How is it that one among equals will seem to have harnessed the moon and stars? I understood the next part, how the logic went. We hadn't been savages all our lives, we'd helped the poor before. But this was something else, was like the dizzying vista above the gorge. You think you've been quite happy. Your loved ones are waiting to welcome you home, and you can taste the broken rocks below through all your broken teeth. You know the terror won't be over until you've thrown your one allotted life away. And so I stepped back just a little from the edge. What kind of reckoning, after all, requires this all or nothing? Hadn't I torn the lovely acres from my heart, which he esteemed as so much filth? The least that would keep the cold off, that's all I'd intended to put aside. You see, and cold came up to seize me. The baptism of the neophytes. He knelt because the others knelt. Nothing was odd about that, except, unlike the others, he seemed to know nothing of shame, which quite astonished me. Not brazened it out or wrapped himself in pridefulness, the surest sign of struggle, simply free. By what conjunction of insight or ignorance I am still at a loss to imagine, from the universal misery of fitting in the body. We were many on the hillside. The waters ran shallow for him as for everyone else. We thought this meant nothing to hide. And it was then I knew the messenger. For some of us, the treacheries have the getting there. We have to be flayed by our own bad faith. And hence, the scene of washing. You'll remember, we still thought it had no limit, that the water and the air it came from came unendingly and clean. We thought we had fouled ourselves alone. And then the young one came and knelt, and I could see the whole equation, what we'd gained by it, and what we had agreed to lose. We'd meant to do better by those who came after. That was both the pity and the point. Her argument for the existence of God. This one then, the doctor, who of course possesses a foreign name, thus gathering all our, what shall we call them, our powers of foreboding in a single sordid corner of the morning news, contrived to miss the following: 8 fractured ribs, 3 missing fingertips, infected tissue torn and partly healed again between the upper lip and gum, and this you will have to use your Sunday finalist to imagine: a broken back, 3rd lumbar, which had all but severed the spinal cord, leaving him floppy, or so the coroner later determined, below the waist. Now granted, she might not have thought to expect a wailing 1.5-year-old to toddle obligingly over the tiles, nor felt she had the leisure to apply her little mallet just below the knee. We see that. But we are not talking nuance here. The tooth he had swallowed, so hard had been the blow to his face. Of course, one had no inkling that would take some sort of psychic or an MRI. But ulcerated lesions on the scalp and ears, I tell you, if I hear once more how the underage mother's underage boyfriend suffered a difficult childhood himself, I'll start to wreck the furniture. When I'm allowed to run the world, you'll have to get a license just to take the course on parenting, and everyone will fail it, and good riddance will die out. But in the meantime, which is where we're always stranded, and ignoring consolation, which is laughable, what's to be made of the sheer bad fit? The reigning brilliance of the genome and the risen moon. The cell wall whose electric charge forms now a channel, now a subtle barrier. No modulating thought has thought to equal. The arachnid's exoskeleton, the kestrel's eye, and we who might have been worthy, but for reasons forever withheld from us, aren't. Wouldn't you rather be damned for cause? I try very hard to write poems that are short, and whenever I think I've done that, it turns out to be the first section of something much, much longer. But I have a short poem here, of which I'm very proud. It's only 9 lines long, and the only way I did this was to basically steal. It's a sort of imitation of a fragment by that poet we know chiefly in fragments, Sappho. You'll hear some phrases from English translations of one of her most famous fragments. The poem is called Narrow Flame. Dark still, 12 degrees below freezing. Tremor along the elegant, injured, right front leg of the gelding on the cross ties. Kneeling girl. The undersong of waters as she bathes the leg in yet more cold. Tongue is broken. God to me. Her hair, the color of winter wheat. The selvage. 1. So door to door, among the shotgun shacks in Cullowhee and Waynesville, in our cleanest shirts, and ma'am and excuse me were all but second nature now, and as one woman comes to the door, she must have weighed 300 pounds. And would you be willing to tell us who you plan to vote for, we say. She turns around with Everett, who are we voting for? The black guy, says Everett. The black guy, she says, except that wasn't the language they used. They used the word we've all agreed to banish from even our innermost thoughts, which is when I knew he was going to win. Two. At which point, the speaker discovers, as though the lesson were new, she has told the story at her own expense. Amazing, said my sister's chairman's second wife. To think what you've amounted to, considering where you're from, which she imagined was a compliment. One country, friends, where when we have to go there, as depend upon it fat or thin, regenerate or blinkered to the end, we shall, they have to take us in. I saw 3. A river full of geese as I drove home across our 1-lane bridge. 400 of them easily, close massed against the current and the bitter wind. Some settled on the ice, and just the few at a time who'd loosen rank to gather again downstream, as if to paraphrase. The fabric every minute bound by just that pulling out that holds the raveling together. You were driving all this time, said Stephen, counting geese. The snow falling into the river. No, the river about to give itself over to ice. I'd stopped. Their wingspans, had they not been taking shelter here, as wide as we are tall. And lastly, a few 3 short sections from a sequence in the voice of Dido, Queen of Carthage, who came, you may remember, to an unhappy end. She was abandoned by Aeneas, who had to get on with his destiny, and killed herself and threw herself on a burning pyre. Aeneas saw that smoke from his ship, but did not know for certain, or said he did not know for certain, that Dido had in fact died, until he saw her later in the underworld. The title of this sequence, which was written in collaboration with a composer who has set it to music, is Dido Refuses to Speak, and its present tense is the moment in the underworld when Aeneas sees her and says, "Oh my God, so it's true. This is terrible. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." And she refuses to speak. She turns and does not speak to him. So here we go, 3. 1. The forestays, the stern sheet, the benches, the yard, the wooden pins to which the oars are bound with strips of leather. He explained this, thole and a loom. I thought the words were just as lovely as the workings. And I thought I knew the principle, the moving forward facing where you've been, the muscled quarrel with the muscled sea, like love, that sweet againstness. And the linen sail, happy the weaver whose work might deck the chamber where we lay us down. How strange it seems from just a little distance. The living tree, the axe, the chisel, cattle whom we kill and skin, all so that they may live again on water, but including us. as when, in early summer in the fields of silver time, the bees are thick with happy industry, as when the workmen trust their overseer to be just, as when the world was tuned to us and we the world, my city on its quarried footing rose and rang with purpose, and the water loved its channels, and the terraces their civic flight of stairs. Reluctant evening, loath to lose the sight of them, would finger the vertical facings until they blushed. I know, a better mind would not require the elements to be like us. We smear our sorry longings on the rocks and trees. But then the very daylight seemed to say we'd built to scale. 4. Once, in a narrow garden, I encountered a thing I'd known before, a scent. I had no words for it. Not citron, though it bore that solvent aptitude. Not anise, though it harbored a touch of clay. A fragrance I had known as in another life, or this life, but before the daily watering down, which left me half transported on an undistinguished plot of ground. So think what it meant when he began to speak. The story we'd stowed as ballast on the fleeing ships had painted on our temple walls the very lights and darks we had depended on to make the place less strange, and on a stranger's lips, to whom the story properly belonged. Or he to it, is there a difference? And poor Dido, mere excursus for them both.